Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm very grateful and honored to have our brother Khalid Green with us today. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And you're welcome, and it's a pleasure to be here. Walhamdulillah. Allah yubarak fikum.
Wa fikum barakallah. So I really have benefited from your channel for quite some time now. And one thing I wanted to do today is just to get to know a little bit more about your background, your history, your embracing Islam and things of that nature. So if you don't mind, just taking it back to your early childhood so we can learn a bit more about your background.
Okay, yeah. So, Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, amma ba'd. So it's always strange and sometimes uncomfortable to talk about who we are and in our past, but I don't know about anything too exciting, but basically, anyway, I'm from Seattle, Washington. I grew up for maybe my primary years in the city of Seattle, in what we refer to as the Central District, and then what was known as the South End. And these are prominently pretty mixed areas. I guess they would be Seattle's version back in the day of what would have been the ghetto. But then, which is unlike a lot of other places in the country. But as I got older, anyhow, we moved to where I'm currently located now, which is in a city called Bellevue. And this is kind of the suburbs of Seattle. When I moved here, it was predominantly white. So that was kind of a culture shock a bit.
How old were you when you moved to the suburbs?
So I was probably, I think we were like fourth grade or something. So it was more probably the shock of being, of moving, because really my family is very interracial, I guess, or so, race was never really an issue, but I guess in the context of the times, we definitely need to talk about those things as well. And then also my elders, which I'm just finding out a little bit more history about right now. My great grandmother, I did meet her and I remember her, and she was actually, I don't know what percent Irish, but she just looked like an Irish white lady, more or less. But, she was almost 100 years. She was about 100, maybe 100 plus years. And so, it's just kind of interesting to, of course, we're all trying to uncover our history, and especially as African-American, with so much being lost, that this has great significance. So it's kind of interesting to see the mix. But anyhow, so we moved to the suburbs, lived in some apartments there, and that was kind of where it was fairly multicultural. It was kind of, I don't know if you'd say poor, but, it was, not the, what Bellevue is known for, because you also have a lot of wealth here in the Bellevue area. So I moved there. It was culture shock, just being a young kid moving, I guess being minority, but I never really thought of it like that. I just thought I was a kid like everybody else. We really didn't, those issues of race weren't really an issue here so much. So, and I grew up here. I grew up in the church, and you're going to have to excuse me. I'm starting to catch a cold, so I'm just trying to fight it. I mean, so, yeah. So anyhow, we grew up here. I grew up in the church. So I come from a fairly religious family. They're really, we're forced to go to church, never got baptized, never really found the significance of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam or worshiping him. But I always had a belief in God. And this, I think, is a very important foundation, and a foundation that made it easier for me, my journey to Islam, as having that religious background and that foundation. And I can recall even growing up with some of my old friends who, had no religion and had no religious background, and how even, akramakum in the state we were in, before going out to the clubs or whatever, I can remember debating, or after those times, debating about the existence of God and so forth. And I always had that foundation where they would argue, no, they're just on being atheists and agnostics and what have you. So that usul, that foundation was very important for making me who I am today, no doubt. No doubt. Yeah, go ahead. If you have anything
Mashallah, I was just going to say, I relate so much to that, being raised Christian and not understanding the whole role of Isa alayhi salam, but still believing in God, having that fitrah. So what, I guess, so what eventually, I guess, led to your, let's say, adolescence years? Like what were you into that would eventually, I guess, lead you to embracing Islam?
Yeah. Well, I was very deep into music, of course, like probably many of us. So much so that I was in, being from Seattle, and as you are, I'm sure, probably aware, it's called the grunge capital. Okay, so in Seattle, although we had hip hop and Sir Mix-a-Lot and people like this, anyhow, I was very much influenced through the music scene, and I was always into really music that made you think, the conscious music. So I liked all kind of music. Like if I was into hip hop, it would be from KRS-One, who was conscious, to this and Black nationalist thought, and all these things. But these things very much impacted and influenced who I am today, no doubt. So with that being the case, I was also, as many of us, were in bands and in groups. So I performed. I used to, from my latter years in high school, we used to do shows and stuff like this in that scene. So playing live, and I was a singer. So I got used to carrying the microphone and being out in the public, having to represent that. In my latter years, probably after high school, I was going through kind of an identity crisis, read the autobiography of Malcolm X, totally changed my life upside down in a lot of respects. I was searching, and I had I used to have a song. I wrote my own lyrics, by the way, and it was called Soul Searching. So the lyrics themselves were talking about where I was at life. I didn't come from I would say my background wasn't that harsh and this, and, my mother and so forth. My stepfather tried to shelter me. Of course, we had all those influences outside. My father died violently. Okay. And so that's very close to many of us. And I would definitely say in many communities, but especially in minority communities or what have you, that's very close to us. We have uncles, we have cousins, we have whatever that have been to prison, been killed, what have you. So all of those things no doubt shaped me. And so, like I said, I had this piece of music or one of the songs that I was performing called Soul Searching. So at that time, I was just looking for, absolutes, the absolute truth. I still had that belief in God. We were doing shows. We never got a chance to get really that big, which was probably a ni'mah for me. You know what I mean? And yeah, to not go out there all the way and stuff like that. So, we played some of the bigger clubs here in the Seattle area for that music scene, that genre. But we never got a chance to really play with big acts and so forth. Anyhow, this influenced me. I was on a path, soul searching to find myself. And I got into yoga. I was really deep into yoga. Okay. I was into starting to read books about transcendental meditation. I had the Bhagavad Gita of the Hindus, and Buddhist and all these things. But of course, they all lack Tawheed, because, and me with that usul of having been exposed to Rububiyyah, we believe in the Lordship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that, I had that foundation. So I didn't find that in those other paths. I tried to meditate. I tried to, do the transcendental meditation and all this stuff. But I was just like, this guy says in the book, you can change, war to peace and, change everything just with your mind. Just meditate, just sit in that room, just go on the mountain and meditate and change the negative energy and the negative thoughts. So I was like, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to exactly work. So I found the shortcomings in all of those ideologies and so forth, and religions. And another point, you know, I
Before
got
getting
into the
into Islam, not to cut you off, but I
yeah,
wanted to
right, yeah,
mention a few things specifically about music, because so many people that I've interviewed over the years, I've found that
mm,
some of my Muslim friends who grew up coming from that Muslim background, they're always amazed. Like, everyone used to be a musician, you know, like
yeah,
so many of
subhanAllah.
us used to be so into music. And now that I listen to you and I reflect a little bit, I wonder how much of that comes from our Christian backgrounds, because I remember in church, we would just sing for like most of the time, you know, so much
Yeah,
of church was connected to music. And then I guess you sort of carry that out with you out into the rest of the world, and you just start getting into your own specific genre. And then,
mm,
especially in our generation, having, you know, certain technology available to us, it became a bit easier for all of us to sort of, you know, almost take on music, our own genre of music, as our new religion, where just like in
yeah,
Islam we might change our name, you know, we would have our own like stage name, or we would, you know, express ourselves through poetry and music and stuff like that. But it's just interesting how so many of us come from that background. And even today, probably so much of the youth, music is like it's like a new religion for so many people, whereas the most
yeah,
famous people on social media that everyone sort of idolizes literally and bases the way that they dress and think after, it's these musicians and stuff. So, you know, subhanallah, that's just something that I found kind of interesting. And it's like,
mm,
mashallah, another brother comes from that
yeah,
background, subhanallah. but
yeah,
um
yeah.
but
I
also
think
coming from
this.
Seattle. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. No, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it seems like Seattle, also coming from that part of the country, you guys have a
Yeah,
pretty unique environment, you know, like in terms of the
mm,
grunge scene and in terms of these transcendental meditation and just the whole vibe, I would imagine, of coming from that part of the world. Because, you know, the East Coast has a typical, you know, stereotypical to an extent vibe about it. Same with certain places down south and on the West. But Seattle, I
mm,
think you guys have your own vibe. I've never been out there before, but mashallah,
yeah,
I'm sure that also played a role in your journey. But so how
yeah.
old were you, I guess, when you started, you read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and then you started, I guess, you know, soul searching and looking into these different things?
So I was, you know, that was well after high school. I was probably pre-20s or right around 20 years old or something like this. And um, so that, you know, it just had such a powerful impact on me, reading his autobiography, and made me reflect and rethink my own history and myself, my relationships, and also and my spirituality, you know. But again, it was just a combination. It was just all coming together at the same time. Like I said, I was doing the music, soul searching. I was looking. I was used to be more of an avid reader than I am now, unfortunately. And, you know, used to read books and used to really, you know, I was just searching. I was searching for something to complete things, you know. And I was very idealistic, you know, on, you know, how to change the world and so forth. So you know, and of course reading that autobiography, and then also courses in college, you know, going to college. You know, I was so excited when I got, for me, I didn't care. I wanted to learn anything and any course. You know, I loved it. I was so wanted to be there. So I had some very interesting courses, like the history of Africa, the history of India. And, you know, it talked obviously a lot about the Muslims' impact there. So I think I was very close to Islam at that stage. So those things very much influenced me too in accepting Islam.
Around what year
Yeah,
was this when you were in college? Because, you know, society has changed a lot
yeah,
depending on the
yeah,
time frame that you.
right. This is 90 92, something like this, 93.
Okay, early 90s. Gotcha.
Yeah, early 90s. Yeah, yeah. 94 probably, something like this. So yeah, that was so those things impacted me quite a bit. You know, it really had a strong influence upon me. I also tried to go to the nation. You know, I tried to not join, but I would go to some of their meetings and stuff. But obviously that just couldn't resonate with me, the supremacy, or, you know, the nationalism to that a level, but really supremacy. and so that, and with supremacy comes basically obviously hatred naturally. So that just didn't work. My grandfather, is my step grandfather, but he was white. It just couldn't work. And but I remember there used to be a very famous speaker from the nation. His name was Khalid Abdul Muhammad. Okay, obviously, which is La Yajuz. But anyhow, he used to be very popular in the 90s and fell out with Farrakhan and so forth. So his Khalid came from that name. And then, I just liked Khalid, but anyway, I couldn't find my place there. It was just false. I just couldn't, not just the supremacy, but obviously their tales of human existence and what have you, and the origin of human beings. So, but then reading, of course, Malcolm X's autobiography and all those things, they just kind of came into play to lead me up to embracing Islam. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like, I don't know, as you go on these sorts of journeys, and perhaps you can clarify, but I guess in this society we are so race-based. We can be so superficial in the way that we class different people that when you start searching for meaning, that's one of the first things you turn to. Is my ethnicity, my background, my skin color, my lineage, and then I imagine the time that you had grown up listening to some of these rappers like KRS-One you had mentioned, and reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, that it sort of pushed you in that direction to an extent, and then the nation. But that's interesting that once you sort of you saw their extremism in that regard, and it conflicted with your fitra and your understanding of the creator and even your mixed background, as you had mentioned, and whatnot. So what I guess, what was it? Well, I guess if you read the autobiography of Malcolm X, how did you end up sort of looking more into the nation at first rather than straight to Sunni Islam?
Well, I think because the reality is Malcolm X's autobiography and a part of his story, although it's major for us, his acceptance of Islam, and major for him, it was for him, obviously, but still, it was still a small part of his story, and I think his impact, a lot of it is his whole transition that he made. Maybe he made that full revolution, but this is a little bit on the side, but I think that we find with people that a lot of times we have an usul, and a foundation. For example, if you had a good tarbiyah prior to Islam, obviously that's going to have that impact you throughout your life. You know what I mean? Or you're somebody who is very sharp. Malcolm X was very sharp and noteworthy as a child, and he just went through major struggles, and it came back and manifested itself, throughout his time in prison, throughout his life, but it was just channeled in a different way to then where he began, in his latter years, debating in some of the top universities, Harvard and what have you, and Oxford, and debating with the best who are well-educated doctors and PhDs, and he smashed them. He smashed them because he was his conviction is well-studied, and but he had that intelligence. So not sure why I mentioned that, but that's something that, it's important. It shapes who we are. We are on this journey in life. And all of those stages, they made us who we are, being a musician, to even being comfortable, I guess, to a degree with a microphone now. I mean, you can't separate it. You can't separate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
mashallah.
Yeah. It's a part of our journey and part of who we are.
So what happened after, I guess, you were sort of, I don't know, you weren't completely comfortable with the Nation of Islam? What was your next step?
Yeah. So, like I said, I dabbled. I went to some of their things because, it was about consciousness. It was about knowing and understand who we are. Also, the 90s were also very tumultuous, like now, I mean, very turbulent times, Rodney King riots, so we dealt with a lot of those same kind of issues, and it's been a continuum. So all of those things, they shaped me. And basically at one point I was doing some social work or something. And this, so I was at I had already quit the band. We kind of went our separate ways. And, I was just into school and so forth and finding myself. And I was working part-time as a social worker at a nursing home. And so I had a friend, she hooked me up to, she was more of a full-time social worker, so I could work there part-time and while I was going to school. And there I learned a lot of history, of course, from the elders there in the nursing home. What an experience. And there was some nurses' aides from Ethiopia and different places. And I don't know how we ended up connecting to eventually trying to go to the masjid. I remember a brother named Muhammad who was not very religious, but he, tried to take me to the masjid a few times. So we went. One day it was, it was closed, or it was outside of salat, time for salat. No one was there. And another brother who, I mean, one of the last times I saw him, he cried. He's just like, you came with me to the masjid, look at you now. And he just broke down in tears, Osman. And so, I went to the masjid. I thought I knew everything about Islam already, because I'm in college and all this stuff and my own reading. I didn't know anything about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I knew a lot about Islam spread in India, the Mughal Empire. I knew about, the Mali and the Songhai empires in West Africa and this and that and the other. So I had this political vision of Islam. But I was searching for that spiritual thing. But I can remember coming to the masjid and then eventually learning how to pray and taking my shahada. And, so I just say in general, it's a growing thing. You grow in throughout your journey in life. But even as a Muslim, when we embrace Islam, since we obviously both have that perspective, it's a growing process. So, I accepted Islam. Seattle has always kind of been behind. It's kind of isolated in a sense, although it's on the map for other things. But, we didn't have anyone to really teach us at that time. And
what year was this when you took your Shahada?
I think it was 93, about 93. Okay. And, so accepted Islam, alhamdulillah, some good brothers and stuff with good intentions, but, we had no knowledge. The community predominantly, probably the majority, I mean, I guess there's probably was a growing Pakistani community as far as ethnically, and also there was a lot of Cham. The masjid I took my Shahada was Cham, which is like a tribe in Cambodia, or they were a kingdom, the Champa kingdom. So actually we have a lot of graduates from Jama Islamiyya who are Cham, and some of them are fairly famous, like Abdul Bari Yahya with Maghribi Institute, Sheikh Farid. I mean, quite a few graduates here, especially among Somalis and Cham. So anyhow, there really wasn't the knowledge back in those days. We really didn't have.
Just to paint the picture for everyone, this was way before 9/11. This was before the internet. This is like a whole different world.
Yes, pagers, 2 pagers was cool, and stuff like that. It was a different world, man. Yeah, it really was. Mm-hmm. So it's a ni'mah, the way people have access to knowledge now, and so much. We're bombarded with information now and knowledge and everything. But then, it wasn't, like I've been saying somewhat recently, the first 2 Islamic related books, aside from having the Quran and the translation of the Quran and so forth, and translations of Bukhari and Muslim and so forth, books that dealt with theology, if you will, were Sayyid Qutb's Milestones, Maududi's, he had a really good book on Dawah and just general principles in Islam. I forgot the name of it. Used to be very famous back in those times. And for us, Jamil Alameen, he had a book called Revolution by the Book. And so the community that although I would, the Cham community was more diverse. You know, we had some brothers from Indonesia, Sudanese, Cham, they controlled the show, but you know, it was a fairly mix. So, you know, if I was in that area, I'd pray there and what have you. But then there was a community that was reverts, predominantly African American, obviously. And we, you know, so then, you know, they were trying to establish Islam, you know, the Raghba, the love of Islam was there. We're all reverts. So it was very good as far as being active in dawah. You know, we used to go to the streets and call people to Islam. And of course, everybody sold incense and oils, or, you know, unless there was a few professionals amongst us. But, you know, it was really good as far as the activity of dawah. But without knowledge, obviously, we find the disasters. So a lot of those brothers, unfortunately, and then the Somalis started to migrate here, coming from Somalia, that generation, that first wave began migrating to Seattle. So there was a connection in general, I'd say, between the Somalis and the indigenous people, if you will, or what have you. We had different brothers, you know, white, black, come into Islam. So, and we had a good relationship with them initially. And but some of the brothers, they got influenced by some of the takfiris, and that's why to this day, why you hear me so much in my lectures about takfir, because I've seen it firsthand how it destroyed our community. Because the brothers were ignorant, we had some brothers with the zeal. They became Muslim. They immediately rushed to England, to one particular brother, to study with Abu Hamza Misri, at that time Faisal Jamaica. Abu Qatada was the big alim. And those guys, the ideology that they were pushing with them, you know, that really, when this particular brother came back, you know, it devastated those brothers, because the brothers some of them were natural warriors anyway in the street. So that just appealed to them, to be able to go roll on somebody, you know, or, you know, crazy stories, man. Brothers, you know, thinking they're commanding the good, the forbidden the evil. You'll pull his pistol out in the restaurant because the Somalis had music in there, or, you know, crazy things, wow. You know, and things that would also cause the intelligence community to get a grasp on Seattle, because that particular brother, he also went to Afghanistan. Then he got indicted for that. And, you know, in the fall related to Abu Hamza, he was a key witness, and it just went, you know, they put Seattle on the map. And so, you know, and that's the natija from ignorance, you know.
How much of the gang culture from like LA and California spread up to Seattle?
Well, we had it, definitely. You know, I think in the 90s and the 80s, you know, that was just a time around the country, but especially, LA, you know, that's West Coast. So we had it and we have it. You know, it's a big problem now. You know, it really amazes me how the youngsters and the young Muslim youth, you know, especially Somalis now, or East Africans in general, they're getting killed regularly. You know, these guys, a lot of them, it's really more wannabe. You know, it's that wannabe thing. It's not like they had the hard life. They came from Hoyo, and they came from, you know, the Duksiga Quranka. You know, they was memorizing the Quran, but they, you know, it's just the excitement of the culture, the media, the music, the everything. They want to be like that. And, you know, this is the end result. So, yeah, we had, that was a big part, you know, the Bloods and Crips. And, you know, we had brothers coming from LA and stuff. A couple of good friends of mine were originally from LA, had served their time. And some of them were Crips, some were Bloods, you know, and then now they were, you know, brothers, you know, you know, their hearts were really, it's just like that, like the Sahaba, you know, that story of the Jahiliyyah and being warriors, or being and having hatred for one another, and then Islam bringing them together. So it was a big, it definitely it was a big impact, you know, and it's a big impact of how it shaped those communities, you know, how it impacted the growth and the downfall of those communities. You know what I mean? From that gang culture, but really bottom line is a lack of knowledge. We had some good leadership, but good leadership without knowledge. I mean, just, you know, just as being a leader, that's one thing I think we miss a lot in a lot of the a lot of our communities. We don't really have leadership, and we have leadership for particular tribes, and even they're not strong leaders necessarily. You know, they're not representative even of their own youth. So what about the everyone else? So, you know, there was a good and bad of that, you know, but it was really a negative impact. So we'd have brothers, you know, fresh out of the prison, penitentiary, what have you, come into Islam, but you know, you didn't have anything for them. But in those days, there was a greater sense of community. In the broader sense, there was a stronger African American community, which everyone functioned in, even a white revert or what have you. The few brothers that came to Islam, they were a part of that fabric. You know, it was just a different time. It was easier for Dawah. It was just really, and we were more integrated. But after that, and after the many changes, and with a huge influx of various migrants from various countries, you know, the characteristics changed, you know, and gentrification, you know, and all those, you know, so many factors just impacted the way the Dawah was and stuff. But yeah, anyhow, bottom line is there was a fairly strong gang culture, and yeah, Tacoma, Seattle.
What eventually led to you deciding to seek knowledge abroad?
So at that, I'd probably say the downfall of that community, and
so the downfall of that community, you would say, is basically because you have these new Muslims with this zeal, but if they don't channel that energy towards true knowledge, towards having true mentors and scholars, you know, it can just be completely destructive. And unfortunately, subhanAllah, it's so sad to hear that that's how it was back then, because you fast forward like 30 years later, it's like we still had these same issues, subhanAllah.
Yeah. But now there's just so much more knowledge accessible, you know? It is. Yeah, that was definitely the downfall. Also, the community, like I said, the community that we had that was indigenous, if you will, that, you know, they also, although I functioned with those brothers, I was one of the few who didn't have the bay'ah, because they were under Jamil Alameen. If you're familiar with Imam Jamil Alameen and that community, because they have the bay'ah, and you know, and so we'd have visiting imams. Another famous imam who used to come to Seattle, Imam Luqman, and he has a huge history. He was killed by the probably the police or the FBI, and so, you know, you kind of have a more revolutionary culture. You know, it was just different. But that was you know, it wasn't about seeking knowledge, and it was very much about establishing internal leadership. You know, like, hey, we need somebody who represents us, who speaks our language, knows our culture, to lead us. We don't need somebody from overseas. So this was the kind of the mentality. Plus, there wasn't anyone really overseas, and it definitely wasn't leadership. You know, I mean, they were just more new refugee communities. In the past 10, 15 years now, with Microsoft being so big, that's what has established some of these wealthy communities, which are over on this side, what's called the East Side, you know, the Microsoft community, which is predominantly a huge Indo-Pakistani community, where the money is, you know, where the money and the ability to do things is. And, you know, they have their own program. But yeah. So
I also imagine
ignorance. Yeah.
I imagine this all being pre 9/11. I mean, there was just much more comfort in even being revolutionary and having that sort of strength, because after 9/11, with all the wars and all of the security things that the government was doing, people just became so much more just paranoid in general and trying to.
And Islamophobia arose, you know, Islamophobia. Because there was a time you could wear, you know, the way we used to do it, you know, you'd have an imama, and you'd have your izar, and, you know, just be on the street giving people, hitting them up, you know. But now those kind of things hardly exist. And unfortunately, I guess as some of us have gotten older, we don't even have that same identity as far as even our dress or what have you. Like, you see me now probably with a lot more casual clothes compared to in the past. In the past, I would have never had a pair of jeans or something like that. So basically,
what was people's reaction back in the day when they saw you with like a turban and a thobe and stuff? Because nowadays they'll associate that, maybe some people who are ignorant, with terrorism, or even if they consciously understand, we've been bombarded so much to be conditioned to associate certain things with negativity. But like back then, before that, I mean, you know, you
Yeah,
must have
it
been
was
much more
different.
free. People must have
It
been
was
much more open.
yeah. And it was much more respected, and especially in African American communities, you know. And so you could go to New York if you were in Siraj Wahaj's there in Brooklyn, or some of those communities, they were established from warriors in blood. You know what I mean? All those communities, they were in the roughest places. So you could walk downtown, walking through Oakland. I remember, those are the days of Tupac and those guys. And, we even would see some of those rappers and stuff like this. We're out selling oils and incense. You're meeting rappers, you're meeting people. And they, in those days, there was so much more respect for Islam in that sense. And even amongst those communities, somebody could be on crack, they could be drunk, and they would try to say salam alaikum, getting off the street from under a garbage can. They respected the Muslims, and the Muslims had more izzah. They had that honor because people, people just had a different respect. But after 9/11 and the Islamophobia, the rise of Islamophobia, and then also the fear amongst the Muslims, a lot of people losing their identity, a lot of people, so many events after events happening that really changed a lot of that. It changed a lot of that. And I think at that time, I had already went overseas. I went to Yemen initially, and that was at the more or less the fall of that community. It had already really declined, and the FBI, for various reasons, was already really on those brothers. Some of the activities they had gotten involved with, and then some of them as were later tried as accessories to terrorism and all this other stuff, and conspiracy to commit terrorism. So all of this kind of put Seattle on the map, and Oregon as well. And at this time, I think I was already overseas. I had went to Yemen, and Imam Muqbil bin Hadi al-Wadi'i. So that really influenced me on a whole different level, and especially coming back and trying to help out, and being a little bit involved in dawah and stuff like this. So then I was really in opposition with a lot of those guys. We really fell out. Yeah.
So what year did you head to Yemen? So the first place that you went overseas to study was Yemen. How did you decide to go there, and what was that whole experience like?
Big, beautiful experience. Anyhow, 1997, saved all my money. I used to do construction, and I was also selling oils and incense on the side. I was single. I wanted to study. And then prior to leaving, literally, all of a sudden, these marriage proposals and all these tests and fitna came to me to try to stop me, and almost stop me. But then my man Abdul Karim, Hafidullah Ta'ala, he's like, Akhi, you got this rare chance. Go. Don't let any of this distract you. Go. I was like, no, I need to get married. No, go. Boom. Went. Actually, I spent some time prior to that. I went to New Jersey, Abu Muslims community. And that's really what pushed me to seek knowledge, because in the 90s, people were literally making hijrah to his community. This is a community to see big beards. And at the time they used to say ATA, above the ankle, thobes above the ankle, pants above the ankle, big, beautiful beards, all the sisters wearing niqab. And, it was just, and from coming from here, the West Coast, I was just blown away, to see this, so everybody's like, Khalid, it's wajib, you got to make hijrah here, man, what are you doing, blah, blah, blah. And I remember I had a chance to get my master's or something. There was like a scholarship, and I went and asked Abu Muslim, I said, should I go study overseas, or should I pursue this, rare scholarship opportunity? He gets on the minbar, he kind of blasts that out. And so I, that had an effect on me, an impact on me. And, at that time I had that desire to study. And I remember going around the masjid, and this became true of me as well as with so many people. So there's a brother, he took me around the masjid. They used to have their masjid, Ahl Sunnah, it was huge, and he said, look at this brother here. Yeah, he went Yemen 2 years. This one, year and a half to Sudan. This one, da, da, da. And so he said, all these brothers, you know, they studied, just dabbled here, dabbled there. No one completed anything. He said, you know, don't be like them, you know. And so, you know, I just didn't really have a concept really of talib al-ilm and stuff. But, you know, I just wanted to go and learn some more about Islam. So I went to Yemen. Boom, I had a one-way ticket. They told me, you know, secret information, how to get to Damaj, and the sheikh is this, Sheikh Mukbil, and this and that and the other. Go to Sana'a and do this. You know, I showed up there in a Muslim country. My first time, I had the Pakistani Penta pajama top and maybe I don't know what I had, some shalwar kameez pants. I don't know what it was, but I show up in Yemen. People got Kalashnikovs in the airport, Jambias, and you know, I was just like, wow, this is, you know, it looked like a taxi stand because Yemen had just come out of a war, you know, out of their civil war and their reunification. Holes in the wall, you know, it looked like literally a tore up taxi stand. I remember saying the couple of words in Arabic because I could read and write a little bit of Arabic, you know, because somebody taught me in the masjid. And I said, Rakis Funduk, saying this to the taxi guy. Boom, he takes me to Tahrir Square. Yeah, so I ended up meeting some Westerners for Fajr. And I was, you know, some brothers from the UK and soon thereafter, you know, so they kind of looked out for me a little bit because I had no Arabic, I couldn't speak, you know, but I was just so happy to hear the adhan and wow. And then I ended up meeting my beloved, Allah yarhamahu, a brother named Ali Compton Clark. You know, he's from straight out of Compton, really. And actually, Mutabil, he speaks highly about him because he also knew Ali and got a chance. But me and Ali go way back, you know, back to Yemen. So we used to have some crazy times. But anyhow, I met him with Hassan Somali. Hassan Somali was there at the time. So then they gave me the information to help me contact to get to the Salafi Masjid to go to Jamal Khair. And I didn't know if I was going to a Hamas camp. I didn't know what was going on because it was all secretive. If the government sees you, if the police this, at the checkpoints do this, don't speak, wear the shamak like this. And then there was a Caucasian brother, may Allah bless him, Abdullah McPhee. MashaAllah, he stayed in Damaj about 12 years. And he also wrote it was me, him, and another big Haas and a bunch of brothers. So Abdullah, they made him go in the back because, you know, he was white, so he was going to stick out. So they had to kind of hide him, you know. And so we went through these checkpoints and, you know, we didn't know what was going on. Get to Damaj, bow, you know, that was it. Sheikh Mukbil and just meeting all kind of interesting characters. So that was my really introduction to the dawah to Ahl Sunnah and another level, meeting that great Imam. But, you know, I didn't really have the tools to benefit. You know, my Arabic, I was just learning the base, you know, in the Medina book 1. And it was hard for me making that transition because that was Yemen in 97. You know, Yemen now is rough, but you can imagine 97. I saw hyenas at night. No one believed me. I walked backwards. They were just watching me. It was like 10 of them. I saw the red eyes. The wall was too big. I couldn't get up there. I used to, Karamakum Allah, have to go to the bathroom in a cup like this in my room, which was never sufficient because it was just too far to go to the restrooms. There was no, you know, it's some rough times. These giant beetles fall out of the ceiling on your sleeping bag. So that was tough for me coming from Seattle. To be patient. Everybody's like, be patient, and you're going to learn. And then there was, you know, it was informal. You know, there was no classes. My idea was to like get into Jam Islamiyya, to be in a classroom setting. But, you know, to have no teacher, my teacher doesn't show up this time. And, you know, it was just different times. And then he's just a British brother. So it was hard for me to stay there too long. So I left, went to other places in Yemen, did my thing, eventually had to leave, ran out of money and so forth. But yeah. So
after Yemen, what was the next? That's very interesting, you know, and I just want to mention that I knew brothers who studied in Yemen in like the 2000s, like, I don't know, 2008, 2009, around that time. And they eventually, I guess, came to Medina, you know, and they used to say stuff like, man, we got it made here in Medina. We got the air conditioning and you got this food and this and that, you know, because in Yemen, You know, you
Yeah.
were there way before them even, so I can only imagine,
Yeah.
subhanAllah, the hyenas and, you know, all of that.
Yeah. Man.
MashaAllah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very different time. Yeah. The time of the
But what,
cassette player. Yeah. Go ahead.
right. So what did that lead to after that? I mean, a big part of it is just trying to run towards Allah, just trying to put yourself in that situation, to go abroad, to get closer to Allah, to meet the other students,
Yeah.
to get these experiences, and just living that lifestyle, even if you're not necessarily, you know, your Arabic isn't at a level where you can really benefit academically.
Yeah.
Just still the whole
Yeah.
experience, you know, you're moving in a certain
Of course.
direction. And so
I
so
don't
what
regret
did
it
that
for a
lead to
minute.
after Yemen?
So after Yemen, so I got a taste. You know, I improved my Arabic. I could speak a little bit, you know, functioning, but I didn't. And I bought started my library there. Guy going to the book fair. So, you know, at that time had some money. Boom. Okay, I'll give you a couple $1,000 here. Just bring back these books. Brought a huge library to Damaj. But, you know, I didn't have, my Arabic wasn't strong enough for me to benefit from those books. I was learning, but I just didn't have the patience. Stayed in Yemen at that time, only about a year or something like that. Went to the UAE, heard there was a place to study there. Okay. I get there, my money, I ran out within 2 days. Okay. No money, newly married, wife's pregnant. We literally were going to sleep in the grass. How many times we didn't. Allah just favored us. Yeah, we had nothing. A brother from Uzbekistan looked out for me, and he talked to Ahl Khair, which happened to be a lot of wealthy Jamaat Tablighi groups. And they looked out for me, and then eventually they're like, you need to go back to America, man. You know, you can't just stay here. And so I couldn't find a place to study. A lot of misinformation. And I was like, prior to that, I had the chance, I was either going to make Umrah and see about studying Saudi, but then I was like, well, the money and this and that and the other, and I hear there's a university there in the UAE, blah, 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 blah. Went broke, came back to America, didn't have enough of the tools to really benefit, and benefit in my own books. So that kept a burning desire. So like I said, all these experiences shape us. So although I didn't get to that chance or didn't take advantage of that chance, that kept a burning desire in me and a passion. Went back to Yemen as an English teacher, as my means. So I had an income. And at that time, I remember teaching one day, so I was also doing a lot of talib al-ilm as well on the side, had good brothers, the beautiful brothers of Aden. And that was at the time there was a bombing. So all of these things, they shaped this current time, the bombing of the USS Cole. I was actually in the same city. I heard it. I heard it, boom, it was in Aden, early morning, probably prior to Fajr or after, I don't remember. And that also put Yemen on the map, and it put so many things on the map. And, all of that. And then I came back to America. Then I got a job in Saudi. And, and I still had that passion to study. So
what year was this when you started heading towards Saudi Arabia?
That was literally September 11th happened, and I was in Yemen. And I heard about it from my students. They said, yo, Stev, you know what? Did you hear what happened in America? Thousands. I said, quit. What are you guys talking about? Because I didn't see the media, And I was like, well, maybe a couple of people died. Something bad happened. What are you guys talking about? No, it was big. It was this. I didn't realize until I was on the plane coming back home how big it was, and all the stories in Time magazine, people raining out of the sky and jumping out together because the building's burning and all this stuff. So I literally had a very short turnaround time. I came to America. Within a month or so, I got my job in Saudi, went to Saudi, boom. And I was in Saudi, and, I had that burning passion to study. MashaAllah, a beautiful sheikh there in Hayal, Sheikh Saeed bin Halil, hafidhallahu ta'ala. And he kind of took us under his wing too, and he was so patient with me specifically, but, I'm with all these Saudis and my Arabic wasn't that strong. That used to frustrate me, But, that was more from immersion. We're studying Sunan Tirmidhi, Muwatta, Imam Malik. He let me be the reader for Sharh Sunnah and read the whole book. And I'm just struggling. All the students are Saudis. And I just felt but I mean, it was really so good for me. And so, you know, I always had this desire to make up for what I missed and what I lost. You know what I mean? And so that's what kept me going, and has kept me, and you know, basically made me who I am today. You know, as far as still, you know, and trying to share knowledge and trying to even learn. You know, is that burning desire to make up for that opportunity, those opportunities I missed, kind of. You know, and that shows you persistent. You need to be persistent. Anyone who's on that path, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely showing persistence. So around 2001 is when you went to Saudi Arabia, and were you there until just recently? Did you just now come back? Or?
Pretty much on and off, I at one point I went back to Yemen and tried to do some tafarrug. So I remember talking to many mashayikh. I talked to Sheikh Ibrahim Raheli, Sheikh Suleiman Raheli, Sheikh Salih Suhaimi, and Sheikh Muhammad ibn Wahab al-Aqil, and many mashayikh there, because I was like, Sheikh, I'm benefiting so much. You know, I'm benefiting Sheikh Imam Abdul Masin al-Abad and all of you guys. But I said, I want to make tafarrug. You know, I still just had the burning desire to sit and not work and study. You know, I went at one point, but my family was growing, tried to get into Jama Islamiyah, went to Qura, and they were talking about the age restrictions, and you need a tazkiyah, and you need this. And then I was like, even if I get that opportunity, how am I going to afford my situation? So anyway, I did eventually go back to Yemen for about a year and spent a lot of money. Went to Dar Hadith in Sheher, in Hadramaut. So that was a beautiful, beautiful experience as a more mature talib. And some of my old brothers, well, one particular one who still lives in Yemen to this day, he's from Canada, Shakir. Anyhow, he's been in Yemen how many years? I don't know, you know, since he was there when I went in 97. So he's been there since then through all kind of wars and famine and struggle, but he's still there hanging in. We're still in good contact. And so we reunited and used to have some husn al-suhba and, you know, in the durus, and mashallah, he was even teaching the Yemenis nahu and stuff like this. And did that, came back to Saudi, went back to Medina. Did that. Then I think I was going through things, and I think my last year in Medina, I kind of, you know, I was going through some struggles and stuff, and I just kind of lost the passion for, you know, I was divided. You know, I still wanted to. I love nothing like sitting with the mashayikh, and you already know Medina, and go to the grocery store. Oh, there's Sheikh Muhammad, you know, Aqil. Oh, there's the reader for Sheikh Abdul Masin right there. Oh yeah, Sheikh Muhammad bin Hadi's over there getting some tomatoes. You know, whatever. Or if you have questions, or you know, whatever. So I still had that desire, but I started working on, you know, going to the gym. You know. So I really started putting my energy into that, and I would still like to attend Dorat, but I wasn't like I had been all those other years, Hadith, you know, where I didn't care if I ate, you know, and oh, there's a dars here after Maghrib, another Dora's going on. Oh, can I split my body in half? I want to be in 2 Doras at once, you know, so this, you know, those were some times in Medina. And so I kind of lost a little bit of that desire. I left Medina, and I left out of my own decision, and I decided, well, I still had contacts, but I felt guilty because I left I was working at Taiba University at that time. I felt guilty about going, you know, asking them for a job again. I had quit and got a salary raise and everything. So I said, yeah, I'll try Jeddah. So I went to Jeddah and started working at King Abdulaziz University. But it took my talib al-ilm really to another level, because there was an excellent program. I also did the Shu'aba in Medina, and the you know, they had the night program, Kulliyatul Mujtama and stuff like this, with a lot of mashayikh at that time who were finishing their PhD, mashallah, used to teach us. And so this took my knowledge to another level in the formal setting of they had a markaz called Markaz li Ta'lim Kitab wa Sunnah in Jeddah. I benefited so much. It just really, you know, being in that classroom and also mixing with the Saudis and stuff like this, and you know, and just making dhabt in talib al-ilm, you know. So I find, for myself anyway, it's good, that combination. And that's a ni'mah to have that, have informal, of course, with them scholars and stuff, but that takes a maturity of even disciplining yourselves to study sciences you normally wouldn't study. And the formal structure makes you study things you wouldn't, like, whatever, was qawaid fiqhiyya, or what do you call it, the Sharia, how the Sharia is evolved, or those kind of tariq tashri, or whatever, these kind of courses, so, or fara'id for that matter. So that really, it just, really helped me to mature, because in Jeddah at that time there was a lot of fitna. I think Musa Richardson was there, not to throw out names, but he was there, and there was a lot of conflict with various brothers and stuff. And I really felt I was just above that. I was like, man, I remember saying to a brother, he said, Khalid, we heard you defending Sheikh Ibrahim Raheli. And the brother who heard it didn't know Arabic. And it was between me and a Moroccan who was close to Sheikh Rabi. So I said, Sheikh Rabi, I benefited so much, Sheikh Ibrahim. Oh, Khalid, and this is all in Arabic. We're having this discussion. The brother's listening. He wants to interject. So he reports what had taken place from his understanding. A brother who I was in Yemen with way back in the day, who was in Jeddah, he comes to me, he said, Khalid, I'm writing this as your sincere brother, you're defending the people. And I was close with Shadid Muhammad at that time too. So they also were practically making takfir of Shadid. It's the beginning of that affair. And I said, whoa, let me just stop you. I said, listen, I've got babies. I don't have time for this. This child said, I said, you know what the best thing to do? Make hajr of me now, so I don't even have to greet you anymore. Just do that. It's better. And he, oh, you're so harsh. I said, well, why are you talking stupid stuff, man? Look how old we are now. Are we still going to be talking about that stupid stuff? I said, let's cut it short. So that was kind of funny. And, but that was my mentality. So I really took it very serious at the Markaz. Even I got the highest grade in Tawheed, Kitab al-Tawheed, and the Saudis, no one else, I was like, me, 100%. In Kitab al-Tawheed, and all the Saudis, some of them in 80%, and it was crazy. So, but yeah, that just really cemented it for me, and it becomes serious and just shaped, and of course, the more knowledge you get, the more, hopefully more mature, and that you can deal with the garbage and the nonsense. I mean, we've got those stories, like you have those stories in Medina of some of the crazy stuff that took place. I remember people some brother who threatened Sheikh Tahir in the Haram. Shadid was relating to me, and he said, man, alhamdulillah, I wasn't there, because
Yes, finally, I was going to ask you how, growing up, seeking knowledge in these different places around certain particular well-known characters who are involved in some of this fitna that's been going on, how you sort of were able to avoid it. But it really does seem like at the end of the day, a lot of it is just maturity, man. You just realize that this is very immature behavior. We got more important things to focus on. And if you can just sort of move past that, then it's really not even as big a deal as people might make it seem, SubhanAllah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, as you said, it's maturity, but it's also the knowledge. As you become hopefully more knowledgeable and more competent, you see a lot of things that are just batin. And that's really my argument, is that what we see from some of our brothers that are more extreme, or some of our brothers who throw away the principles of Ahl Sunnah, is really, it's a departing from knowledge. And that's why for me it's important to reclaim, or I don't know if I should say I'm trying to reclaim, but I don't give that to, everyone says, gives Salafiyya a bad name. But I just think, a lot of people are not representing Salafiyya. So the more we gain knowledge, the more we found out. The more you sat with the ulama, the more you see, this is not what they were teaching. Sheikh Salih Sahimi didn't tell us. Even some of the ones that are more controversial, even Sheikh Obaid, which I sat with, he didn't teach that. I may not agree with every fatwa and every hukum, or, in the divisions that happen, but again, that wasn't even the asl of the tarbiyah he gave us. But other people, they just took it, ran with it, used it for their own hizbiyah, their own possible financial gain, and all the other issues. And it just got out of control. So it's still a sickness. And the youth, I guess, generation after generation, obviously they don't have that experience. So they're still confronting some of the same things that were dealt with 20, 30 years ago, perhaps. And even by some of the scholars, some of the things you translate from Ben Uthaymeen, he was dealing with it back then. Imam al-Albani was talking about it back then. It was really destroyed with the flag of Elm back then, but it's a new issue. Should I pray in the Salafi masjid? Should I do this? The Imam is this, you know, it's crazy stuff. What's your view on this?
No, I had the same experience in Medina. Like the longer I stayed there and actually learned and studied, not only myself, but even other people who were sort of in these groups left it. They saw through it, you know. So a major part of that is just maturity and sticking out, seeking ilm. And inshallah, the scholars themselves will clarify it to you. You know, I remember some of the assignments specifically that my teachers gave us was to expose them as being astray in a lot of what they were calling to and doing. So subhanAllah, you know, Jazakallah khair for your time. It's been an hour, so I want to wrap it up. But I did want to just emphasize to all of the viewers that if you want to seek knowledge, there's a lot of inspiring notes to take from your story, Allahu Mubarak, about how you could tell that you wanted it. I mean, we're talking about the late 90s. You were going overseas, and you know, for what has it been? It's been like 20 years, over 20 years, you seeking knowledge overseas. And as you said, struggling, you know, it takes time. Sometimes you'll be put in situations where the teacher will tell you to read. I remember being in Medina and I'm in there with Arabs as well. And they're like, you know, Sajid, read. And I'm struggling to read, but through it and understand you're doing this for the sake of Allah and you can't give up. And, you know, it's a big inspiration as somebody who you didn't necessarily, you know, you didn't get accepted to Medina or some university to sit there and study, but you there's no doubt in my mind, you earned a better education than many people who did go through those courses just because of your dedication and sticking it out. So I think a lot of people should learn from that and not think that I got to get accepted or else, you know, I can't learn my deen. I mean, there's so many opportunities nowadays. And actually that leads me into the final thing I want to sort of talk about is your plans now in terms of this institute you're starting and the da'wah you have, your YouTube channel, so that people can benefit and let them know. Because I found your channel to be so beneficial. Allah Mubarak. I mean, really, you talk about important topics. You don't get into all of the drama and the silliness. Like you really seem to have a large focus on just teaching the proper deen and the essentials. So I just want to, you know, give you the last word in terms of talking about some of your projects now that you're finally back after all these years.
So I'm working on Al-Athari Institute. You know, of course, it's hard by yourself, but basically at this stage, I'm just recording material, kind of finalizing the curriculum. I need to go ahead and quit, you know, get a little bit, I shouldn't say better motivated, but, you know, take care of some things I need to do as far as the logo and, you know, getting the, you know, working on the editing and stuff like this. But alhamdulillah, it's going, you know, even since I've been here and especially since Ramadan, I was able to record quite a bit. And as you probably saw, I actually have a physical place as well, which is a physical studio, if you will, in New Mexico, which is in progress. But alhamdulillah, was a place to set up my mektaba. I miss it dearly right now being in Seattle. And but that's also where I plan on, you know, making the institute grow and go further, you know, to be able to do Dorat once I have the base established and up and running, you know, because then I want to do a lot of live courses, hopefully have ta'awun with other brothers, even invite brothers to come out, let's go hunting for rattlesnakes. And that's what
you know, I wanted to ask you as well, is a lot of your videos are out in nature and stuff like that. I wanted to ask you about that, man, about the
well, you know, I guess it's just, you know, like we said, you go back to your Rasul. I love the outdoors. Okay, I'm an outdoors guy. What better way for me to do my thing and make it an Islamic journey, you know what I mean? So and one thing I
where are you a lot of the time?
I'm everywhere. You might find me in Ethiopia. You might find me on the beach in Costa Nura in Sardinia. But here now, Washington is so gorgeous. That's one thing we just have forests. I can go for 30 minutes from the house right now, and I'll be in pure green, lush rivers, waterfalls, creeks. You know, it's just gorgeous, man. So even yesterday, these guys, I ran into some guys shooting AK-47s, and actually a bullet kind of came past me. They were shooting towards the trail, which was crazy. Alhamdulillah, they were nice guys. I let them know, hey, I'm coming. It's actually, you can hear in the background when I was shooting videos. But that was kind of a crazy experience. So, you know, you got to be careful out there as well, you know. But I love it. It's a part of who I am, you know.
Yeah, mashallah. Yeah, I love the scenery, man. It's beautiful. So I'm going to put links to all of your social media, your YouTube channel, so that people can follow and benefit. And inshallah, man, I could keep talking to you, but maybe we can continue this some other time. So I really appreciate you taking the time out. Jazakallah khair. And until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hayyakum Allah. Jazakallah khair.